Yeah.
Shan Prabhu said all small books are $5.
Yeah, all small books are $5. The one Gita for the enrichment is
50.
50. And there's one book, Siddhanta offering Ganesh, that is 10.
So he said all books combined is $90 or $100, but that is coming to more expensive than buying Indian 5.
No, how many books are there?
11 different types, small books.
No, then probably he did not order all the books. Basically, what is the total cost of all the books? The book is about 10.
Okay, 10%.
10 What is the cost of total books?
Okay.
ॐ अज्ञानतिमिरन्धस्य ज्ञानाञ्जनशलाकाय चक्षुरुन्मिलितं येन तस्मै श्रीगुरवे नमः। नमः ॐ विष्णुपादाय कृष्णप्रेष्ठाय भूतले श्रीमते भक्तिवेदान्त स्वामी इति नामिने। नमस्ते सारस्वती देवे गौरवाणी प्रचारिणे निर्विशेष शून्यवादी पाश्चात्यदेशतारिणे वाञ्छाकल्पतरुभ्यश्च कृपासिन्धुभ्य एव च पतितानां पावनेभ्यो वैष्णवेभ्यो नमो नमः। जय श्री कृष्ण चैतन्य प्रभु नित्यानंद श्री अद्वैत गदाधार श्रीवासादि गौर भक्तवृंद। हरे कृष्णा 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 हरे हरे, हरे राम 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 हरे हरे। Hare Krishna. So I thank all of you for being here today for this session. You already had one more long session. So today in this session I'll speak a introduction to the topic and take one main point, and we'll continue a more detailed discussion in the later sessions. Am I audible to everyone behind? Okay. So topic is what your phone can teach you about your mind. One of the problems when we start studying any spiritual subject is that it all seems very unfamiliar. Okay, what is all this spiritual stuff? Many people feel, I'm not interested in this. I can't connect with this. So, Srila Prabhupada, when he presented spiritual knowledge, he always tried to present it in very contemporary terms. So, for example, in his Bhagavad Gita, 15 chapter, 6th verse, the verse itself says, Natad bhasayate suryo na shashanko na pavakaha yad gatva na nivartante tadhama paramam mama. So in that verse, in the Bhagavad Gita, Krishna says that spiritual world is not illumined by the sun, Natad bhasayate suryo na shashanko, nor by the moon, na pavakaha, nor by fire. Now, Srila Prabhupada adds in his translation the word electricity. The spiritual world is not illumined by electricity. Now we may wonder, where is this electricity coming from? It's not mentioned over there. So the point is that when scripture is to be studied, the point is not just to get it right. The point is to get it across. To get it across. That means the essential point that is there, people should understand the message. So for example, if somebody comes and gives a class in excellent Sanskrit, but nobody in the audience understands Sanskrit, they got the point right, but they didn't get anything across. So now, when it comes to language, it's easy to understand. I don't know this language. So somebody has to speak, either translate that language into the language which I understand. However, language, when we use the word language, we use it, it can be applied not just to the verbal tool that we use for communication, but language can also be applied to the conceptual tool that we use for analyzing and understanding. All of us have a particular worldview, which we grow up with. And things which don't fit in that worldview, things which don't make sense within that worldview, we just can't connect with them. So the worldview that we have is like our language. And it is when whatever message is given, it is communicated in terms of that worldview. Now that worldview may not be exactly correct, but that is the frame of reference with which we have grown. And things have to be made intelligible within that worldview. And then we may expand the worldview to accommodate the things which were not included there. We may even revise the worldview. But first, things have to make sense to us. And knowledge progresses in a particular way. If say, today I say that I'm going to speak on the demographic patterns of bears in the deserts, in the polar regions of Russia. You wonder, what has that got to do with me? No, we just won't be able to connect with it. But when we say that, oh, actually, the population of bears in the polar areas of Russia, that is decreasing. That indicates that the climate is actually changing. And climate change is going to affect all of us. Then we see the connection. So in general, knowledge progresses from the familiar to the unfamiliar. Knowledge progresses from the familiar to the unfamiliar. Whenever we hear something unfamiliar, if it is connected with something familiar, then it locks on over there. But if it is not connected to something familiar, then it just stays unfamiliar to us. It doesn't connect with us. It just doesn't register with us. In English, there is saying, hey, that doesn't ring a bell for me. Now, what does ring a bell for me means? That actually, it comes from the metaphor that actually when something is understood, then our memory is like a place where when a bell is rung, that means a connection is established. And a chain of events starts happening. Just like in a classroom, say when a bell is rung, that means the interval is there or the break is there, children all rush out. So when something rings a bell, that means it triggers a set of thoughts inside us. And it activates us. We are able to connect with it because it is connected with something inside us. So same way, when we want to understand the spiritual concepts that are given in the Gita, if we can connect those concepts with contemporary things in our world, then it rings a bell within us. These things which are abstract start becoming clearer. In the Bhagavatam itself, in the 11th canto, there is a section, it's called the Avadhut Gita, which is enlightenment by the natural path. There's a book written based on that. Learning from 24 gurus. And those gurus are basically from nature. And okay, what one can learn from a tree, what one can learn from the sky. Now tree, sky, these are not directly spiritual. They are part of the material world. But by observation and connecting those things with spiritual truths, we can learn about spiritual truths. And in today's world, most of us, we live not so much within a natural setting as we live in a technocentric setting. So in a technocentric setting, when there is technology all around us, can technology be used for spiritual purposes? One, of course, we are using it right now. We are using a mic, we are using a projector. So we are using various devices. That way, for conveying the message, as a channel for the message, physical or instrumental, we can use technology. But technology itself can be used as a metaphor. Technology can be used as a tool for comparison by which we can learn. So that's the background for this topic. What your phone can teach you about your mind. Let's move on. Yeah. So the phone is the most ubiquitous of external devices. It's among all the devices that we use, this is almost all pervasive. In fact, according to some statistics, in the past, It is like even people who are very poor in India, the slums, they would have TV. And there would be antenna coming out of their houses. But now, people almost, they may be starving, but they have phones. So the penetration of phones has become far, far more than that. What TV achieved in several decades, the phone has penetrated more than that in less than a decade. The smartphone is not all that old. But now, of course, there's also a question whether the smartphone makes us smart or unsmart. But what we will see today is that actually the phone is, because it's so present around us, because we use it so much, because we do think about it, whatever happens. So we can learn from it how to take things forward in terms of understanding in our inner world. So the idea is, we are anyway going to think of the phone. We're going to use it. So in the Bhagavad Gita, in the 10th chapter, when Krishna talks about how he should be constantly remembered, how the pure devotees constantly remember him, Arjuna asked the question at that time, Keshu keshu cha bhaveshu chintyosi bhagavan maya. How, O Lord, can I remember you? And Prabhupada explains in the purport, the word bhaveshu, it refers to material existence. That people in general are conscious of material things. So when they're conscious of material things, how can those people who are conscious of material things remember Krishna? So then Krishna gives his vibhuti. Vibhuti means the special, bhuta means existence. Vibhuti means vi is Vishesha. It's a special existence. Something that is special within existence, something that catches our attention. That's a vibhuti. So now when Krishna gives a list of vibhutis, that is the indicative list. That is not an exhaustive list. He says, for example, among mountains I am the Himalayas, among water bodies I am the ocean, among animals I am the lion. So the idea is, whatever is the most attractive, whatever is the most powerful, whatever is the most influential among a particular category of things, we see that it's that object's influence, its speciality, its attractiveness as a manifestation of Krishna. And in that way, we can understand that, okay, this is so attractive. Where does this attractiveness come from? Its attractiveness comes from Krishna. Krishna talks about that principle at the end of the Gita. In that 10th chapter, 10.41, he says, Yad yad vibhuti mat sattvam shrimadurjitam eva va tattadeva vagachatvam mamate jomsha sambhava. So he says, whatever is opulent, glorious, beautiful, know that to be manifesting a spark of my splendor. So, if we are to if we were to talk about that list as indicative, we can expand that list. Say, we could say among cricketers, Krishna is so-and-so cricketer. Among footballers, Krishna is so-and-so footballer. Now that is not a static list. In each generation there may be different footballers. There may be different cricketers. So the idea is that whoever attracts our attention in this world, whatever attracts our attention in this world, where does that attractiveness come from? Attractiveness is coming from Krishna. It is manifesting Krishna, a spark of Krishna's splendor. So we could say that among devices, Krishna is the smartphone. That is what attracts people's attention. Maybe 30, 40 years ago, we might have said among devices, Krishna is the television. But television is now almost passé. People still have television, people use television. But nobody is excited about televisions so much. How many companies are really, we have got a new brand of television, promoting it, advertising it. It doesn't make any much news. So whichever things in a particular contemporary generation are attracting our attention, what we are anyway going to think of, if we can connect it with spiritual truths, then we can direct our thoughts towards Krishna. Thinking about Krishna, there are two broad ways of doing it. Thinking about Krishna and Krishna's message. One is that we withdraw ourselves from the world and we focus on Krishna. That is what we do in our sadhana. in our chanting, when we come to the temple, when we when we go on pilgrimages, we are withdrawing from the world to connect with Krishna. Now that mode of connection is important so that we can focus on Krishna. But Krishna is also present in the world, in the sense that everything in the world is a manifestation of his energy. So therefore, we can connect with him also through our capacity to see the connectedness of things of this world with Krishna. So the phone, if we could connect some philosophical points with the way a phone functions, then that can remind us of those philosophical points, and that way we could get certain things across. So now phone is something which we all are familiar with, so I don't have to elaborate on the phone. But the mind actually has many, many meanings. Not just one, or we usually use the word mind in a particular sense, but in common parlance, the word mind has many meanings. So for example, if a teacher is giving class, teacher is speaking in a class and a student is looking here and there, teacher may say, give this your full mind. Give this your full mind. What does that mean? It means give it your full attention, isn't it? Or if somebody comes up and they are studying in class and they are studying in college, and suddenly they come and tell their parents, I want to drop out of college. The parents will say, have you lost your mind? Now, have you lost your mind? There, what does the word mind mean? It means intelligence. Have you lost your mind? Why are you acting in a crazy way? So, the meanings of words are actually not just fixed. They are not stored in dictionaries. One word can have many different meanings. And which meaning we are referring to, we need to be clear. Similarly, the word mind. I said Einstein was one of the most brilliant minds of the 20th century. Now, when we are using that word mind, there we are referring to an intellectual person, a very brilliant person. He was one of the most brilliant minds. Now, in especially Western philosophy, the word mind is used for the non-material side of things. So for example, there is a common phrase, mind over matter. Mind over matter. There was a Western philosopher, René Descartes, who talked about mind-matter duality. The idea, he said that body is made of matter, and there is something beyond the body, and that he called the mind. So he referred to the non-physical part of our being, that is the mind. Now these are all valid senses in which different people have used the word mind. When the Bhagavad Gita uses the word mind, it uses it in a particular sense. What is that sense? To understand that sense, we'll have to understand the Bhagavad Gita's model of the self. The Bhagavad Gita offers us a particular understanding of who we are as persons. And based on that understanding, we can understand what the mind is. So it offers us a 3-level model of the self. There is the body, there is the mind, and there is the soul. And so our current existence, we could say, is 3-dimensional. We have physical side, mental side, and a spiritual side. Now most of us know that there is the gross body, the subtle body, and the soul. So, bhumirapo nalo vayu kammano buddhirevacha ahankara iti yamme bhinna prakritarashtadha. Krishna says in the Bhagavad Gita, 7th chapter, 4th verse, that these 8 elements, earth, water, fire, air, ether, mind, intelligence and ego, they comprise the 8 elements, 8 components of my separated energy. Now among these, the first 5 are considered gross, the remaining 3 are considered subtle. Now the subtle body is sometimes referred to in shorthand as the mind. All the subtle body has mind, intelligence and ego, but they are all essentially the same thing. I'll explain what I mean by this. When I say the mind, intelligence, ego are essentially, in structure, they are the same. See, if I have a phone, in the phone I may have a OS, some basic operating system is there. And then I have some inbuilt apps. And then I have some apps which I further downloaded. So now, if we look from the software perspective, the all apps are essentially codes of 0 and 1. All apps are essentially codes of 0 and 1. Now, from the content perspective, there is no difference between the, say, the operating system, a native app, and an added app. The difference is from a functional perspective. In fact, there is a difference between one and two any two apps. There's no difference in terms of the content. It's just a set of it's a sequence of zeros and ones. All apps are essentially the same, but in terms of functionality, they are different. Similarly, when we come to the subtle realm, when you come to the level of mind, intelligence, and ego, it is, what are they made of? Earth, water, fire, air, ether. We understand that they are made of atoms, but at the subtle level, we don't have anything called atoms. Atoms are gross. They may be invisible to a naked eye, but they're still gross things. So when you talk about mind, intelligence, and ego, we don't have the conception of atoms as we understand it in modern physics. So structurally, actually, they are the same. It is functionally they are different. So in that sense, we could refer to all three together as the mind. That same substance, that same program, the same idea basically, same code of ones and zeros. If it is arranged in a particular way, it may function as an app doing this function. It may, if arranged in a different way, it may function as an app doing another function. So the mind is in that sense, the intermediary between the body and the soul. Just like the software is the intermediary between the person, the user, and the hardware. And in this way, we can compare. Where exactly, what role does the mind play in our functioning? Now, most of us, when we get a computer, nowadays, for all practical purposes, a phone is like a computer. So when we get a phone, now the phone, when we think we get a phone, we essentially think of the structure of the phone. But actually the structure of the phone would be of no use without software on it. The software usually comes with it. In the old days, when you would purchase a computer, we would have to get a separate CD and then install the hardware, install the software. Afterwards it starts functioning. Nowadays, most computers come with it. So when we think of getting a phone, we don't think of the phone and the software to run it, the OS, as something two different things. We just get it together. So like that, for all practical purposes, the body and the mind, they are lumped together as one unit. I'll talk about this. A big difference, but for certain practical purposes, the body and the mind are lumped together in the sense that the body and the mind both are material. Body and the mind both are material. But just as in a computer, in a phone, we could say the hardware is something which you can physically see. If there's damage on the hardware, we can say, oh, there's a crack here on the phone. Oh, there is this part which has become deformed. We can see it very easily. But if there's some damage in the software, we can't see it. Similarly, when we say people are hurt, if somebody has got a fracture, somebody has got a limp, somebody has got a scar, we can see that, oh, this person is hurt. But if some person has been emotionally hurt, we can't see that. But that is also real. Now, in what sense are the body and the mind one? They are one in the sense that both of them are different from us. Just like the phone, the software and the hardware, both are separate from me. Now, within themselves, the software and hardware are very, very different. And if there's a software problem, hardware problem, the way to deal with it also is different. And that dealing with software and hardware problems, I'll talk about more in the evening talk. But here the point which I'm making is that trying to understand this three-level existence that we all have. Okay. So we have to have a sense of distance from the mind so that we can understand the difference between us and the mind. What do I mean by this? That at one level, the mind is inside us. At another level, the mind is outside us. What do I mean by outside us? Actually, the mind, right now say, I'm speaking this. So the mind is inside me and the mind is saying, what you are speaking is very abstract. Nobody is understanding it. Should make things simpler. Maybe there is a mind inside you. What is all that mind may be saying? What is all this strange stuff going on? I thought I came here to hear about Krishna. But what is all this about a phone going on now? So we all have a mind inside us which is speaking certain things. So in that sense, the mind is inside us. But this idea of inside and outside is based on the reference point of the body. From the body's perspective, the mind is inside us. And say this glass is outside me, outside all of you also. But if we consider that our actual identity is that we are souls, then from the soul's perspective, the mind is outside us. We are not our mind. The mind is outside us. And that's where things become complicated when dealing with the mind. See, with respect to the phone, we can see both the software and the hardware as outside us, because it's just outside entirely. But when it comes to us, ourselves, the body is something which we see. Okay, this is physically here, and there's the world that is outside us. But the mind is inside us from the body's perspective. And because of that, we tend to very easily identify with the mind. And I'll talk about this identification and how it can create problems soon. But the important point is, just because the mind is inside us, that does not mean we and the mind are the same. That does not mean that any and every thought that comes in our mind is necessarily our thought or it's our desire. Let's try to understand this further. Yeah. Now, often we have devices, and the devices may have apps within them. So the apps have the apps have default settings. The device themselves has default settings. So one of my main services is writing. So while writing, when I have to proofread, I often use a text-to-speech software to read out what I have written. So to the human eye, the and them may look very similar, and I may not notice the spelling mistake. But when it is read out, the pronunciation is so different that I can catch, oh, this is a mistake. So once I had written, the soul is Satchitananda. And the text-to-speech software read it out, the soul is Saturday Chitananda. So now, actually, I had written it properly. I was wondering, where did Saturday come in over here? Then I look back, then I found, from the computer's perspective, I thought that SAT, what is that? If it's a weekday, so I have to expand it to Saturday. So there's a default setting over there, and so it was like an autocorrect over there. Change Sat to Saturday. But the autocorrect was incorrect. And I had typed in the correct thing, but the computer made it incorrect. And then I had to recorrect what I had done. So just like sometimes some default settings in a device can make a correct input incorrect. Like that, we all also have default settings in our mind. And those default settings often make the correct into incorrect. What that means is, let's consider one of the biggest problems that America is facing. See, as technology is becoming bigger and better, it is said that all our devices are becoming smaller and smaller. The computers are becoming smaller, the phones are becoming smaller, even the weighing scales are becoming smaller. But the people on those weighing scales are becoming bigger and bigger. So, obesity is a big problem nowadays. And when this is a big problem, there have been studies done about why people overeat or how people overeat. So now what happens? Many people resolve, I'm going to eat regulated. There's a survey done asking people, how many food related decisions do you take every day? And most people, they said we take around 12 to 15 decisions. Should I eat this? Should I not eat this? But then they went over the full day and they found on an average, people take 215 food related decisions every day. Now, how is it possible 215? Actually, we get so many food related stimuli in today's world. We just be passing by a hotel. We say, oh, this food is there. Should I take it? Should I not take it? We may see a billboard. We may see a promo. Oh, maybe I should buy this. Maybe I should not buy it. So actually, we keep thinking about it. And we take some decisions based on that. And now, how do we take those decisions? So we often talk about conscious and unconscious. But there is a third. There is conscious, unconscious, and there is subconscious. Subconscious means that which happens below our conscious awareness. So for example, say a person has decided, I'm going to eat healthy food. So they have kept some salad or some fruit. Whenever I feel hungry, whenever I get a snack attack, as they say, the desire to have a snack attacks us. When I get a snack attack, I can't say no to it because I'm hungry, but I'll take some healthy food. I'll take a fruit, I'll take a salad, something healthy I'll take. But suppose they have some healthy food in their drawer below their workplace, and they also have some unhealthy food, maybe something very fatty. Now, if they're conscious, okay, now I'm feeling hungry. Okay, I'll take this fruit and I'll eat it. If they're conscious, they will eat the healthy food. But suppose they're talking on phone, or they're working on the computer, they're just discussing with someone, and they're not really conscious of what they're doing, and suddenly they start feeling hungry. Now, without even they realizing, their hand will go to the fatty food. And they'll start eating it. And after eating, hey, I planned not to eat, what happened? So what happens is, we all have certain default settings within us. So the hunger is a natural bodily need. But what I eat when I am hungry, that is something which is a setting which has been made in our mind. And that setting may be incorrect. That means, there's some people who drink a lot of soda. So whenever they feel thirsty, they don't drink water, they drink soda. Now water is quite good. Soda is also maybe useful in certain situations. But if that setting has gone into their head, okay, thirst means I take some soda or I take some soft drink. Then all the water could serve their purposes, they take the soft drink. For many people, when they're thirsty, they take tea. Sometimes it may be fuming hot and they take fuming hot tea at that time. Actually, it doesn't serve much purpose, but that is the setting that got in their mind. Whenever I feel thirsty, I should take tea. So we all have certain default settings within us. And those default settings may not be the best settings for us. They may be faulty. And, when often we make resolutions. Okay, I'm not going to do this, or I'm going to do this. But, the problem with the resolution is that it's like, say I came by a flight now from Laguna Beach, Irvine. So there's a takeoff. The flight takes off. Say it took off at 6:50 and it's supposed to land at 9:15. So there's a takeoff, there's a landing. Now what happens? Our resolutions take off. But they crash land before reaching the destination. They just take off very enthusiastically. This is just a few months ago, there was New Year. I was giving a class in Australia. So I was quoting that actually, if you see, for many people make New Year resolutions. But it is found that more than 90% of the New Year resolutions are not new. They're resolutions that were made in the previous years, but you just couldn't keep it. So now this year I'm going to do it. So the problem is not that sometimes people say, I just don't have enough willpower. I don't have enough determination. I don't have enough willpower. Now that is one understanding of it. But that is a very incomplete understanding. So when we talk about default settings, the willpower alone is not enough. Say suppose this floor is, say, inclined like this. Now the floor will be inclined like this, and as soon as water falls on it. Now say if say there the on that near that wall, say the wall has become cloggy because of water, too much accumulation of water, and we want the water to flow this way. And here there's a sink or a drain from which the water can go out. Now if the floor is inclined this way, then no matter how much I intend, oh, the water should go this way. But the water is not going to go this way. Because the floor is inclined this way, then the water is going to go this way. Now, if I want the water to go this way, each time the water falls, I have to actually maybe use a sop or a brush or something and push it in the opposite direction. So now we easily understand, if somebody says, hey, somebody said it's angry, why is the water going that way? The floor is inclined that way. That's the way the water is going to go. If we don't want the water to go that way, we will have to change the inclination of the floor. And if we don't change the inclination, we can't blame why is the water going that way. So when it's a physical structure, it is like when a physical structure is in a particular way, it's not a matter of willpower. Why is the water going in that direction? Well, that is where the water is going to go. Because the structure is like that. Now, by my willpower, I may decide that I will push the water in the opposite direction. But the water by itself is going to go in that direction. So we understand this easily for physical structures, but this applies also for the mind. Although the mind is subtle, but still it is real. And we use the word inclination for the mind also. I have an inclination for this thing. I have an inclination for music. I have an inclination for cricket. I have an inclination for geography. Or whatever. We use the word inclination for different things. Now the word inclination means that I'm interested in this. I like this. My thoughts naturally go in this direction. So mental inclinations affect the flow of our thoughts as tangibly as physical inclinations affect the flow of water. Just as physical inclination will naturally cause the water to flow in a particular way, similarly, mental inclinations will automatically cause our thoughts to go in particular ways. And when the thoughts start going in that direction, there's no use beating ourselves up for lacking willpower. It's not a matter of willpower. It's just nature that is like that. Now, when I say it's nature, that doesn't mean it is not changeable. If the floor is inclined in this way, I can do some architectural work and change the inclination to be this way. But I have to do some physical work. Just by my desiring, the water is not going to flow in this direction. So similarly, with respect to our mind, say we may decide, okay, when I'm hungry, I'm going to eat healthy food. But if I've been habituated to eating unhealthy food, eating fatty food, then naturally, as soon as I start thinking of food, my thoughts will go in a particular direction. Okay, I want to eat this. It's not necessary. Okay, there's an announcement here about a Toyota Camry 059 URD is wrongly parked. So like this, suddenly things flash on our mental screen also. We are thinking about one thing and suddenly something else comes up. Sorry? Okay. Yeah. So now moving forward, with respect to default settings. Now with respect to a device, when you have to understand it, actually all of us, now if we have a browser in our phone, we often set it to a particular home page. Now as soon as we open the browser, automatically it will go to that home page. Now if I don't want to go to that home page, then I have to go back and change the setting of that browser. Without that, as soon as the browser is opened, that home page will open. Like that, our mind has a particular home page. For some of us, it may be food. For some of us, it may be money. For some of us, it may be a particular relative. For some of us, it may be, for patriots, it may be their nation. For different people, it may be different things. For people who are cricket fans, it is cricket. If they're doing nothing, they're thinking about cricket. So especially when the World Cup is going on in India, often you see people just walking along the streets and imagine swinging their bats, bowling, catching. It's actually just what happens is just in their mind they are there in a cricket match. They are thinking, I am the next Tendulkar, I am the next Kohli, or whatever it is. So that is the homepage of their mind's browser. And whatever, just like the homepage is what naturally opens up whenever the browser is open, like that, as soon as we start thinking, our mind goes to the object that is our greatest attachment. So by homepage of our mind's browser, I refer to the object of our greatest attachment. Now it's not necessarily that the object of the greatest attachment has to be a bad thing. It may be. So if we are working in the world, money is important for us. If a mother is constantly thinking of her child, that's good. She has to take care of the child. But sometimes when we want to think about other things also, we may not be able to think if our browser gets caught on that homepage. That's where it goes. So, and sometimes we may be attached to things which are unhealthy also. A person who's alcoholic, they may just, from the moment they wake up first thing in the morning, think of as alcohol. Now a person who's a drug addict, from the moment they wake up till the moment they sleep, the thought that grips them and drags them the most is the thought of drugs. So depending on whether our mind is in the mode of goodness, passion or ignorance, we may have different home pages, which may be of different levels of distraction for us. Some distraction may not be much harmful, some distraction may be very harmful. But actually, that is not a distraction, that is our default focus of attention. It is a distraction from some higher purpose that we may have, but for us that is a default thought. So we all have certain settings for our mind. And now there are two extreme approaches to the settings of the mind. One is to resent them. Why are they like this? And the other is to just surrender to them. Now neither of them is of any practical help. When I start resenting, why does my mind go in that direction? Well, that is the way the mind is right now. Just like sometimes we get some devices, and those devices have some inbuilt apps. Like some devices come with an inbuilt browser, and we may not like that browser, but by default that is the browser. Now we can't change the default setting of that device. We may go deep in and find out, install some other browser, and we may change that browser later. But by default, it will come with that particular browser. So like that, now our mind has a particular set of settings. Now resenting it is of no use. So some of us may, so going back to more philosophical context, the Bhagavata, the Gita talks about Chatur Varnyam Maya Srishtam. Guna Karma Vibhagasha. Krishna says that in 4.13, that there are these 4 Varnas. Now the 4 Varnas, the 4 social divisions, essentially what are they about? They are about 4 distinct mindsets. And a person who's of a Vaishya mindset, by default, their thoughts will be about money. For a person who's of a Brahmana mindset, their thoughts will be about books, about studying, about philosophy, about knowledge. Now it is not that thoughts about money are bad and thoughts about knowledge are good. Both are just the default settings. And if we start resenting, why is it like this? Then we just waste our energy. Suppose a person who is of a Vaishya mindset, the thoughts go towards money a lot. And then they see somebody who is just delighting in studying Shastra. They think, why am I not like that? Or somebody is a Brahmana, thoughts naturally go into scripture. But they think, this person, he earns so much. He's so shrewd about money. I can't even count notes properly. So why is it like that? Well, that is the way it is. We all have to understand that we have got this body which is with a particular set of settings. Now, the settings are changeable to some extent. That we'll talk later. But the point is, we have to accept that this is my beginning point. And when we are in the world, it is not that we have to become someone else. A Brahmana doesn't have to become a Vaishya. Nor does a Vaishya have to become a Brahmana entirely. Yes, some Brahminical qualities need to be developed by a Vaishya. And a Brahmana may, if they're living in the world, they may also have to have some understanding of monetary affairs. But it's not that we have to change ourselves to become someone else. You know, if, say, I have an Android phone and somebody has an iPhone, somebody else has a Windows phone. Now, they all can serve the function of communication, but they will all have certain features of their own. Now, an Android phone will not function like an iPhone, and an iPhone will not function like a Windows phone, or a Windows phone will not function like an iPhone. So there are differences. And once we accept, okay, this is the starting point, then we may be able to customize. If I like some feature of an iPhone, I might try to get an app by which I can get that customized function in my phone. Or I don't like something about Android, I might remove that particular software, it's a particular app. We can do those things. But the starting point we have to accept. And once we accept, from there we move onwards. I'll talk about acceptance and transcendence much more in our later classes. But at this point, the default settings, one point I said is, one attitude, if we start resenting, why is it like this? That resentment doesn't serve any purpose. Because we are what we are. We can change from here, but we have to begin from where we are. Like if we are traveling by road somewhere, and we go to a wrong place. We have to accept that I'm at the wrong place, then start off towards the right place. But start resenting, why am I at this wrong place? I'll never get to the right place. So we begin, resenting our default settings is of no use. On the other hand, just accepting them, that is also of not much use. Or some people they just keep forgetting things. And then, why didn't you do it? Oh, I forgot. Why did you write it down? I forgot that also. So now, some people say, this is the way I am. Now, this is the way I am is not a rationalization for irresponsibility. If I say this is the way I am, then okay, I accept you, but then we have to take precautions to be able to do things effectively. Now, so if I have a particular responsibility, I have a particular role, I have a particular service, and I know that I have weakness in that particular thing, then I may have to prepare a little bit more. I may have to plan. So it's not that because something is a default setting, we just accept it as it is. We can change it. It's not that we have to surrender to the default setting. And the change, it involves many steps. But the point which I made is that just intention or willpower alone is not enough. There is a process required for making that change. The physical inclination is a particular way. Actually, I'll have to change the flooring of the floor so that the inclination will go in a different direction. Similarly, if we have settings in a particular way within us, that's like the inclination of the mind. So, to change that, just like if there's a default setting in the phone, we may have to go deep within the settings. Okay, where is the default setting for the browser? I don't want this as my default browser. I want some other default browser. So we'll have to go deep within, find the setting and change the setting. So if I have autocorrect of Saturday, but I don't want to do that, then I'll have to go deep into software. Where are this autocorrect settings? And then in this autocorrect, I don't want this autocorrect. So it requires some more process. Just intention. I don't want Sat to change to Saturday. That is not going to make much difference, because that is the default setting over there. So resenting the default setting is of no use, nor is just uncritically accepting the default setting. What we need to do is understand the default setting, first of all, recognize it, and then recognize whether it is desirable or undesirable. And if it is undesirable, then find the process to change the default setting. At a general level, the process for changing the default setting of our mind is the process of Bhakti Yoga. Bhakti Yoga purifies us and it changes the default setting gradually. I'll talk about this again a little bit later. But at this stage, I'll focus today is on the concept of default settings within the phone, and the changing them with something which we have to do, but we can do it in a balanced way without resenting it, without accepting it, but evaluating it maturely. So with the process for changing, as I said, there is a first, I recognize the water is going in this direction. I don't want the water to go in this direction. Then what do? Krishna talks about Shama and Dhamma. In the qualities of a Brahmana, in the 18th chapter, he talks about Shama and Dhamma. Shama is peacefulness of the mind. Is, we could say, control of the mind, calmness. And Dhamma is control of the senses. So he says these two are the first two qualities of a Brahmana. Shamo damastapah shaucham shantirarjavam evacha jnanam vijnanam astikyam brahma karma swabhavajam. So 18.42 he says these are the qualities in the Bhagavad Gita. Now what is the significance of Shama and Dhamma? Control of the mind and control of the senses. So control of the mind means, say, if this is the home of a person, say two friends are staying in a hostel over here, and this is their workplace. And along the way, there is a bar. Now one of them has never drunk. And that person has learned from childhood, drinking is bad, it is bad habit, it will get you into trouble. Person has never drunk and has no desire to drink also. Then what happens? They may see somebody drinking, they may see even their friend drinking, they may see some tempting hoardings, but they don't feel much agitated. Because that is not the option in their mental set of options only. They've not done that, they're not going to do that. So even when they pass by that bar, they won't drink. The desire also will not come. The mind will stay peaceful. That is Shama. Dhamma means the other person has drunk a few times. And then as soon as they pass by the bar, they get the desire. Maybe I should go and drink. No, I have too much things to do. No, I want to drink. No, but it will cost so much money. No, but I want to drink. So like that, the desire comes in. So the mind is not peaceful. But Dhamma means, even when the mind is not peaceful, at least don't act at the physical level. So best is keep the mind peaceful so that one doesn't get agitated. That's mind control, Shama. But if the mind is not peaceful, at least don't act at the physical level. That means Dhamma, control it. So going back to the example of the water flow, Shama means we change the flowing itself so that the water naturally flows in the desired direction and doesn't flow in the undesirable direction. But Dhamma means when the water is flowing in the undesirable direction, we physically push it back. We don't let it flow. It will naturally flow in that direction, but we don't let it flow. We push it back. So in the initial stages of our bhakti, when we are trying to change the default setting, often we have to push the water in the opposite direction. Push the water. The mind goes in a particular direction, we push it back. So that by the default setting, which is there in the mind, our thoughts will go in particular directions. But push it back. It goes off, push it back. Goes off, push it back. Yato nischalati manaschanchalamastheram tatastato niyamyaitad atmanyeva vasham nayet. Krishna says in the Bhagavad Gita 6.25, 26, 27, he analyzes how to control the mind. He says, wherever and whenever the mind wanders, bring it back under the control of the self. This is actually the process of Dhamma. The mind is going in a particular direction and we are feeling, let me do this. But no, if I decided not to do it, I will not do it. So it's like repeatedly, the water is going in the wrong direction, push it back. So as soon as I open the browser, the home page is opening. But I don't want this page to open, then close it. I had not yet come to know where is the default setting and how to change that setting. So what I do, if that page is open, just close it. So now, like that, in our situation, our mind may go in certain directions. But when it goes in those directions, we have to be cautious. More about being cautious, I'll talk again in our future sessions. And how to increase our conscientiousness, our cautiousness, our awareness of things. But at this stage, there is one process is repeatedly making sure when the wrong thing happens at the mental level, don't let it happen. Change it. Don't get angry. Why is it happening? Yes, it's happening, but get it back. Don't let the water flow too much in that direction. Water is flowing, push it in the opposite direction. Like that, we mechanically keep doing the right thing. Now the difference between a physical device and its settings and the mental functioning is that actually if we just keep changing, the mind goes in a particular direction, we get it back in that direction. And some other direction. The mind goes in particular direction, we get it back in the right direction. Just by doing this again and again, itself the mind setting will change. To illustrate this, so with respect to say the home page of a browser opening, we could give an example that the home page opening is one thing, the browser setting is another thing. And if I find the browser setting and changing, the home page will not open itself. But with respect to purification of the mind, things don't work that easily. Say for example, if we are going on our browser, and let's look at Google autocomplete now over here. Say that if, I'll conclude with this example, and then we can have some question answers. Let's say if I have been visiting a particular website, say India News. So if I have been visiting that repeatedly, and as soon as I type I in my browser window, immediately gives autocomplete India News. Now, if I decide, I don't want to visit this site so much, I don't want to spend so much time on that. Now what I do is, if instead I go to some other website, say if I decide to go, I go to ISKCON News. Now, if I keep choosing, as soon as I comes, India News will come in the autocomplete. But I don't click that autocomplete, I have ISKCO, ISKCON News. And again, if I keep visiting ISKCON News, what happens? Over a period of time, when I type ISKCON News will come. So like that, by repeatedly choosing a particular option, the autocomplete which Google gives, that changes. And similarly, when we repeatedly do a particular activity, and that becomes like a pattern in the mind. That becomes a setting of the mind. So just by repeatedly doing the right activity, it requires willpower, it requires determination, but if you just keep doing it, gradually the setting of the mind changes. This is the mechanical way to change the setting of the mind. There's a devotional way also to change it, which we'll talk about later. But this is also one way. Just repeatedly do the right thing, then gradually the option of doing the wrong thing goes back into the background. And the right option becomes the default option. So, if somebody is addicted to eating sweets, and they want to eat sweets with a lot of sugar, a lot of fatty chocolates or whatever, which are not so healthy. But then they decide, I have a sweet tooth. I can't give up eating sweets. But I'll eat natural sweets. Maybe I'll take dates. I'll take something which is naturally sweet. Now initially, what will happen? The mind will say, no, I want to eat this, I want to eat this, I want to eat that, I want to eat this toffee, I want to eat this chocolate, I want to eat this candy, whatever. But if the person keeps eating say dates or whatever, natural, they want to decide to eat. Gradually, as they keep doing it, what happens? The taste also changes. The sweet taste, the desire for sweets may not go away. But the desire for which particular sweet I need to eat, that can be changed. So just by repeatedly doing this, actually, if they consciously do it for 1 month, 2 months, 3 months, then after 6 months, say, as soon as the desire for eating some sweet comes in, immediately they'll think of dates. They'll not think of some other sweets. So what happened? By repeatedly choosing a particular option, that option has become like the default setting of the mind. And when this happens, then the struggle internally decreases. Krishna talks also, the mind can be your enemy and the mind can also be your friend. So when the mind's default setting is something which is harmful for us, then the mind is our enemy. But when the mind's default setting is something that is helpful for us, then the mind is our friend. And the whole process of Bhakti Yoga, yoga in general and Bhakti Yoga in particular, is actually to change our mind from being our enemy to being our friend. And I'll discuss about this more in our next session. I'll summarize here what I talked. We started by talking about this topic, what your phone can teach you about your mind. And in that, first I talked about how the spiritual message, whenever it is shared, the point is not just to get it right. The point is to get it across. So when Srila Prabhupada adds electricity in the translation of 15.6, the purpose is what? The purpose is that Krishna's point is that the spiritual world does not require any source of light. So Krishna, 5,000 years ago, the common sources of light were sun, moon and fire. But today for most people, the most common source of light is electricity. So to convey this point that the spiritual world does not require any artificial source of illumination, Prabhupada adds electricity over there. So electricity may not be there in the Sanskrit, but the point is not just to get it right, the point is to get it across. That the spiritual world does not require any external source of illumination. It is self-luminous. So similarly, the spiritual truths need to be translated into contemporary terms by which they become intelligible to us. Knowledge progresses from the familiar to the unfamiliar. So when something is explained in familiar terms, then the unfamiliar also it rings a bell within us. It triggers our thoughts and an understanding follows. So I talked about how if somebody is speaking in a different language, we won't understand it. But when people come from different cultures, different backgrounds, different worldviews, the way they think, that is also like their mental language. And unless things are presented in terms of their mental language, they may okay. The verbal language makes sense, but things don't register inside. So we live in the modern times, and we need to understand the spiritual concepts in terms of contemporary terms. So I talked about how the word mind and the phone. The phone is the most ubiquitous device today. So we talked about Krishna's opulences. The list is not exhaustive, it's indicative. Whatever is attractive in this world, whatever we are going to think of anyway, Krishna through the Vibhuti Yoga chapter says, understand that that thing which attracts you, that thing which you think of, that is a manifestation of my greatness. So in today's world with smartphones being so ubiquitous, we could say that among devices, Krishna is the smartphone. We think about it anyway. So that is that attractiveness which impels people's thoughts toward the phone. That attractiveness comes from within is a spark of Krishna's splendor. And then we discussed about the word mind. We use it very commonly, but it has many different meanings. So it can refer to attention, intelligence, intellectual person, or the non-material side of things. The Bhagavad Gita uses it in a specific sense to refer to the intermediate reality between the soul and the physical body. So like there is hardware, software and user. So like that there's the body, mind and soul. And the subtle body is structurally more or less similar. Functionally it's different. So subtle body, just like the software, within software we can have OS, native apps, and secondary apps. Now in terms of structure, all of them are just codes of 0 and 1. But functionally they are different. So from the structural point of view, the whole subtle body is one. From the functional point of view, there are different functions which are performed by mind, intelligence and ego. That's why as a shorthand, the whole subtle body is sometimes referred to as the mind. So now we discussed about the mind being the intermediary between the body and the soul, just like the software is the intermediary between the user and the hardware. So just as we think of when we think of a phone, we understand the hardware and software are together with it. So like that, when we understand the body, we should know the body and the mind are together as something outside of me, something distinct from me. Now it is easy for us to, with a little philosophy, to understand that I am different from the body. But the mind, to understand that it is different is a little more difficult. Because the mind is inside us from the body's perspective. It is outside us from the soul's perspective. But because it is inside us, we tend to get carried away by its thoughts. And we think of those thoughts as our thoughts. So to disidentify means not identify with the mind. To disidentify with the mind, what we need is some distance. So just as the software may have certain settings in a computer, which may not be desirable. So Sat Chitananda changing to Saturday Chitananda. It's undesirable. It's a default setting. Like that we all have default settings for our mind, which say if we are going to eat some food, the default setting, good food means fatty food. So that is the default setting. So that's why if you're not thinking consciously, then subconsciously our hand will go towards the fatty food. So to change that, it's not just willpower or intention alone. That if the floor is inclined in a particular way, water will flow in that direction. No matter how strong my intention, it should not flow. And similarly, if we have certain default settings, our thoughts will go in those directions. So we need to just I want the water to flow in a different direction. Either I have to change the flooring or I have to keep pushing the water in the other direction. Just the intention alone is not enough. So like that, our resolution, I won't do this alone, is not enough. We need to follow it up with something more. And in that connection, I discuss about our settings. We all have certain settings. And once we recognize those settings, it's not necessary that we resent the settings, nor is it necessary that we accept the settings. We evaluate the settings. If we resent it, then we are just disempowering ourselves, because we are what we are. And if we just accept it, then we are not using our free will effectively. We can change things. So neither resenting nor accepting, but evaluating and then choosing. So initially we discussed, especially for changing the settings, what we call the brute force method, repetition method. That Shama and Dama, that if the mind is peaceful, if there's no inclination, like a person who has never drunk alcohol, they will not have no inclination when they pass by alcohol bar also. That's Shama, the mind is peaceful. But if the mind is getting agitated, then Dama, bring it under control. So if the floor is inclined in a particular direction, to get the water to go in the other direction, repeatedly you have to keep pushing in that direction. Like that, the mind may go off in a particular direction. So to get it to go in another direction, and we have to repeatedly bring it back. It's like, say, if with my computer browser, I repeatedly open India News, and I don't want to visit that site. So to change that autocomplete from India News to ISKCON News, I'll have to go to ISKCON News again and again and again. Like that, if we keep choosing a wiser thing again and again and again, over a period of time, that wiser thing will become our default choice. It's like, say, if I'm eating chocolates, and I know that's unhealthy, I have a sweet tooth. I don't have to give up necessarily sweets. I eat natural sweets like dates. If I keep eating it again and again and again and again, over a period of time, that will become the default setting. So one way of changing the default setting is by deliberately making the right choice again and again and again. Further ways of changing the default setting and further exploration of this metaphor of the mind, of the phone for understanding the mind, we'll discuss in our evening sessions. Thank you very much. Hare Krishna. So any questions or comments? If you want to write down and send in chats, that's also fine. Or if you would like to discuss in the evening, that's also fine. Yes, Prabhu. Okay.
Thank you very much, Prabhu, for the class.
I got the question.
Yeah.
So to change the default settings, we need to be aware of it. But how do we become aware of things?
More aware. Yes.
Yeah. It's actually a part of a later seminar, but I just mentioned 2-3 points quickly here. The first point is awareness of our lack of awareness is also a step towards awareness. So sometimes we may chant. We say, my mind wanders everywhere, you know. Well, at least, complaining that the mind is wandering everywhere is better than wandering everywhere with the mind. When I'm saying the mind is wandering everywhere, that means I don't want it to wander, but it's wandering everywhere. So, if we have so chanting is an activity where we are actually forced to be aware of our minds. And when it is going off in other direction, and we find it is actually chanting, we may not realize through chanting that Krishna is not different from the holy name. But through chanting, very easily we can realize I am different from my mind. Because I want to focus, but what is this force within which is going here, going there, going there? there is something inside me which is not me. That we can very easily understand by chanting. So, in that sense, even if our chanting is not attentive, still it gives us some level of realization. It takes us a step towards realization that, okay, at least I'm not aware. I want to be aware, but I'm not aware right now. So the first step is just becoming that, okay, I'm not conscious. I'm not aware that things are going off in a particular direction. So any activity which requires us to focus in a general way, on any activity which requires us to focus, that actually helps us to become aware of things, become more aware of our mind and mind's default settings. So sometimes we chant and somehow struggle through our 16 rounds and then finished. It appears like a workout. If you could wait after that and think for a few minutes, okay, my mind, every day we feel my mind wandered. But okay, we can just look back for 2-3 minutes after that and think, where all did my mind wander? And then we can try to find out patterns. Now, every day the mind may find some new directions to wander, but there are some things which are common. And some things which are common, it may worry about finances, it may worry about relationship, it may worry about this, it may worry about that. And then, if we can think through those things, consciously focus on those distractions and process them. Okay, this is, okay, my finances, I have this concern, but this is a solution for it, and I can work out on this solution also. Calmly write things down. Okay, this can be dealt in this way, I'm doing these things to deal with it, and in future I'm going to do this. So when the mind starts wandering, or maybe if we know there are 2-3 distractions which regularly distract us from chanting, then just before we start chanting, just read whatever we have resolved. Okay, this distraction is troubling me, okay, but this is what I have done to deal with this. This is what I am going to do to deal with this. So we address the specific distraction using our intelligence. And then it's not that the mind will stop wandering, but at least the mind will not get so much energy. Because what happens, the mind feels, this is a big problem, you're doing nothing about it, do something. What is this chanting? Stop it, do something else. But, yes, this is a problem, and I have done this. Now sit down. Now focus on chanting. So the mind, it may not immediately listen, but it does not get us so much energy to agitate us. If we know, I have done this to solve the problems. Sometimes that means observing. We often focus on concentrating on the holy name and trying to get the mind back forcefully to the holy name. That is good, it is essential, that's what we want to do. But also observing where the mind is going and then trying to deal with that in a practical as well as an intellectual way, that can help us to decrease the force of distraction. So just as it applies to chanting, it can apply to other things also. Wherever we are unaware, if we start recognizing, how is it that I'm becoming unaware? Or what is exactly happening? Where are my thoughts going? Then we can address it specifically. Does it address your question? Thank you. Any other questions? Yes, Prabhu.
Hare Krishna, Prabhuji. Thank you for nice class. Connecting self unto the Lord Krishna is very wonderful. So I have a question about when we go in a path, there was Sukadeva Goswami and with the Parikshit Maharaj conversation about Bhagavatam. Those days the intelligence was so high they can directly speak without Bhagavatam and they understand and they can remember. But in the Kali Yuga there is Manda Samanda Matayu. So we can't even remember, but I have the question, even in this age, the right now, we are sitting and we are living in this world, we have to connect the things which we can understand, like you are giving cell phone to connect the Krishna, then we can understand the Lord. So easily. So when the scripture described as a Bhagavatam is, even the Bhagavatam has not like simple book, but Bhagavatam himself is Lord Krishna. So when we touch the Bhagavatam, we associating with the Lord himself. But in these days, when we use our cell phone opening and then all the devices, everything. So how we can feel that this is like hardware? Even the Bhagavatam, we are putting the Bhagavatam as hardware, and hardware is himself Krishna immediately right away.
Okay.
But today we have like computer, cell phone, we are touching.
I understood.
But how we can?
Okay.
Thank you, Prabhu.
So the question is that the Bhagavatam is not different from Krishna. So when we touch the book Bhagavatam, we are connected with Krishna. But say when we have the Bhagavatam's verses in our smartphone, so when we're touching the smartphone, are we actually touching Krishna? Or how do we see this? Ultimately, Sarva Vidhi Nishedasu Etayor Kinkaram Smartavya Satatam Vishnu Vismartavyam Jatuchit. That the purpose of all rules and regulations is to always remember Krishna and to never forget Krishna. So whatever is favorable for our remembrance of Krishna, we accept that. And whatever is unfavorable, we avoid that. So now, some devotees may feel that, okay, when I sit with the physical book Bhagavatam, I'm really feeling like I'm studying Shastra. And then, that's what stimulates their remembrance of Krishna. Some other devotees may feel that, actually, if I have a book, I may not always be carrying the book with me. If I'm reading it on my phone or my computer, then I can mark it. I have a page marker. I can immediately go to that page. I can have all my markings with me. I can have my whole book with me. So they may feel this is an easier way for me to remember Krishna. So it's in certain settings, the traditional forms we do preserve. It's not that in the temple altar, instead of the deities, we are going to put a phone with the image of the deities. We are going to have the deities over there. So in certain places, the traditional forms will be there. But at the same time, we have to also remember the purpose. And the structure, the form should serve the purpose. The form should not obstruct the purpose. So if somebody doesn't have a physical book, then with the phone they are reading, that's wonderful. The important thing is to remember Krishna. So if you see, as technology is progressing, things are changing drastically. Before, say, Gutenberg, when he made the printing press, actually books themselves were a scarcity. So Bhagavatam itself, throughout the history of the Bhakti tradition, the book Bhagavatam was not very common. The book Bhagavatam was rare. It was there probably with some Brahmanas. We know that story of Srinivas Acharya. When he wanted a Bhagavatam, he actually went across from Puri to Bengal, and then he came back. He wanted to study under Gadadhar Pandit. But Gadadhar Pandit's Bhagavatam had got completely worn out because of his tears. So actually to get a copy, he had to go from one country, one state to another state and come back. So in the past also, the primary transmission of spiritual knowledge was through the oral tradition. That people would come and hear. In practically every village, every town, they had their sadhus. They had their learned sabha, learned people. And then there were traveling monks who would go from place to place. And they would share. So in the past also, it's not that most people were physically reading books. It was that they were hearing. So the primary mode of transmission of knowledge was through hearing. Then as books started getting printed, so books became more and more available. So in a sense, the printing of books made access to physical books more widespread. So naturally, when something becomes more widespread, there's a tendency to devalue it a little bit. So something is very rare, so the Bhagavatam was only with Brahmanas, say. And in the village there may be 2 or 3 Brahmanas who have a Bhagavatam. Then naturally the Bhagavatam would be very much respected. Now everybody has a Bhagavatam. The respect for it may go down a little bit. So now similarly, if every phone has a Bhagavatam, then the respect for it may go down. But the point is, that is simply a cultural form. If you remember the spiritual purpose, so spiritual purpose, now if somebody has got, say, 18 volumes of the Bhagavatam, Then, if the Bhagavatam was only in one place in a village, the people might even offer arti to it, offer flowers to it. But if that Bhagavatam is in every house, it's not practical to worship it in every house. Maybe on special days, we may offer do something for it. So the cultural form in which Shastra manifests, that has historically also changed. In the past, Shastra would be handwritten. The Prabhupada did not insist that we have to have Shastra handwritten. Use printed books. That's perfectly fine. So today, if you're using phones, the cultural form certainly has certain reverence associated with it. But there is cultural reverence and there is spiritual reverence. Spiritual reverence comes from realization. So if we have philosophical understanding that, okay, Krishna is manifesting through the Bhagavatam, Krishna is manifesting through the Bhagavad Gita, and that wisdom is available here, then the spiritual purpose of remembering Krishna can be served even through the phone. So the cultural form is important, but the cultural form is meant to assist the spiritual purpose. And if sometimes the cultural form is not particularly easily available, then whatever way the spiritual purpose can be served, we should serve it that way. So we may not exactly get the feeling on opening the Pocket Vedas app or whatever on the phone that, okay, I'm touching the Bhagavatam. But we can be intellectually touching Krishna. We can be devotionally touching Krishna by using our intelligence to understand the Bhagavatam, and by using our heart to devotionally connect with Krishna's message in the Bhagavatam. So Krishna always remains accessible. The specific forms in which we access Krishna may vary according to time, place, circumstance. But Krishna will always be accessible. And the way to access him is through the devotional intent of our heart. Does it answer your question?
Prabhupada said that print the book and distribute the books.
Correct.
So the people can read more and more my scriptures.
Correct.
And become a devotee. So even today Prabhupada printing books are going so
Correct.
low because we are using all these devices. So when we preaching, we can't sell the laptop or these devices like that. So how we can preach that the incoming generation, like today I'm here, but tomorrow I'm not here, and the generation will come. How they can spread this movement by this using the science.
Okay. So Prabhupada said print my books and distribute. Now we can't actually say distribute laptops or phones in the containing Prabhupada's books. We have to distribute physical books. So what do? Actually, I think our generation's problems are enough for us to deal with. Future generations, Krishna will send intelligent, devoted souls in each generation of his mission to carry on his mission. So we can focus on our generation. And yeah, we can of course there are leaders who are doing some succession planning, but we just can't foresee the future too far into the future. We will foresee it a little bit. So 2 points I would say about this. First is that in general, the digital distribution and the physical distribution, they are not competitive. They are actually complementary. That means that there are some people who read only digital books and they don't read physical books. So if we keep our message restricted only to physical books, we will not reach them. And there are people who read physical as well as digital. So if our message is available in the digital books, digital format also, then those people may connect with that, and so many people prefer to read short things on computers or on phones. And when they want to read something, they just browse through books, they look at their excerpts, look at some sections. This thing's interesting. Then they get a physical copy and they read it. So the digital presentation of our message can actually expand the physical presentation also. So especially the younger generation, it's mostly on the digital devices. So it's not that they don't read books, but first they explore on the digital realm. There's a Pew Research Foundation, which is especially known for doing surveys about religious organizations, into religion. And they found that in the last 20 years, or the last 1 or 2 decades basically, in the age group of 15 to 40, The people who converted to Christianity, almost 40% of them were introduced online to Christianity. I mean, that's 40%. So it's a substantial number. So if we are not presenting our message, others are going to present their message anyway. And then people will go over there. So we have to present in the traditional format for people who are ready to take in the traditional format. We have to present in the contemporary format for those who are ready to take in the contemporary format. We have to be present wherever people are present so that Krishna's message is available to them. And how to do it in future generations, we really don't know at this stage how the world will change. Maybe 5-10 years ago, people had thought that the physical books are going to go out of print because digital books are going so much. But at least last year's survey indicates that again physical books are going up. So people still want to feel books in their hands. Digital books have been going up also, but physical books have had a resurgence. So we can't, the world is changing so fast. In the past, changes that would take 50 years or 500 years, now they're happening in 5 years. So we can't really predict much in the future, but we have to be resourceful. Make Krishna available in whatever forum people are searching for. Does that answer your question? Thank you. Thank you. Any other questions? Yes, Krishna. So till what time we should go on? Please let me know. Okay, fine. Yeah, we'll come to you. Yes, Prabhu.
Hare Krishna, Prabhuji. Thank you very much. So to your analogy of the body being the hardware and the mind, the software, and the soul being the user. So the software, the hardware is changing after every life, but the software is not changing, I believe, right? It's the same software that carries over from one life to another life to another life. So to your keeping that in mind, and you said, how our default settings get changed because of our action. Like if I constantly go to India News, when I open the browser, I type India News comes because of me doing. But so what I'm trying to say is, this is due to stuff that we've done not only in this lifetime, but also in previous other lifetimes. So this whole process of changing the default setting seems to be a very tough process. So going back to the analogy, if I'm the user, can I think of Lord Krishna as an admin or a super user? And can the seeing that the user is having so many problems with the software and hardware, can the admin come and just do a reinstall or wipe out the whole thing and help the user?
So changing the settings is a very complicated process. So can we say that Krishna is like the super admin who can just change all settings in one go? Yeah. Yes, so Krishna can definitely do that. At the same time, Krishna wants to see whether we want the change. So we can see in our own lives that some changes have already happened. See, some of us might have been eating meat before. But now, if we are traveling in a plane or somewhere and see somebody else is eating meat, now practically many devotees fall back from Krishna consciousness, but very few, if any, go back to meat eating. Prasadam is a higher taste. So what happens is, certain desires which we may have had earlier, they just wipe it off. So we can look at our own past before we were introduced to Bhakti 5 years, 10 years, 20 years ago. And we can see some interests have just gone off now. Something which we were craving for, now those cravings are not there at all. So the process of Bhakti, purifying potency is so great by Krishna's mercy that some settings get wiped off. But some settings take longer. There are two reasons for some settings taking longer to change. One is that they themselves may be very deep-rooted from previous lifetimes. And second is that we may also indulge in them intermittently. So it's like if 10 times I go to ISKCON News, but after that 2-3 times I go to India News. Then again I comes, it's still going to be like, so some things which we just made when we started practicing Bhakti, we just made a clean break. When we made a clean break, then those tendencies don't surface again. But some tendencies we just keep surfacing and we keep indulging in them. So because of that, those still stay there in either the foreground or the background of our consciousness. So Krishna, he ultimately doesn't want to impose his will on our will. And that's why he won't make changes unless we show him that we want the changes. And if we show him consistently, then whichever settings, whichever conditions are troubling us, he will help us to overcome them, and gradually they will also disappear. Says Krishna is the super admin, but he is also a person who respects our free will. And so he wants us to, by our conscious actions, show what we want to choose. And if we choose repeatedly, then Krishna can do much more than what the mere power of our choice can do. The inner change requires much more than that. And that much more that is required, that will be done by Krishna. Okay? Thank you. Hare Krishna. Yes, behind. Yes, Prabhuji.
Hare Krishna. Thank you very much. One example is Dhruva Maharaj. He had
beautiful.
Strong desire, but he followed his guru's instruction.
Yeah.
His mother had indicated to him that you have to see Lord Vishnu. But how do you see Lord Vishnu? You have to meet a pure devotee of Lord Vishnu. And that was Narada Muni. And he instructed Dhruva how he could achieve his material desire. But by strictly following his guru's instructions, his material desire was purified and completely eradicated when he actually saw Lord Vishnu. So the admin rebooted and changed the whole configuration of his way of thinking. So he said, you know, instead of, I was looking for cut pieces of glass, and now I found a diamond.
Yeah, a diamond.
So that is the example. I'm sure Prabhuji is going to speak about this tomorrow. He explained the mechanical way. Now he's going to explain the easy spiritual way. But actually it's very hard because we have a very strong false ego. So for example, like every week we encourage people to come out on Sankirtan. But how many people actually come out? Every day we have class. How many people actually come to the class? You see, so the fact that we resist doing these things means that it's going to take a very long time for us to purify these pre-existing false conceptions in the mind that have been ingrained after many, many births and deaths. It can only be overcome by regular hearing and chanting. In groups, the group, let's say, environment leads to consensus understanding of the Shastra. Without a consensus understanding of the Shastra, you cannot have a concerted effort to preach. And therefore, preaching will be ineffective. When we go out in Sankirtan in a large group, like we're going to go out today at 1 o'clock, you go out with a very large group, and the devotees have been chanting 16 rounds and following the regulative principles. Their chanting and dancing is ecstatic, and their preaching is ecstatic, and that becomes infectious. One difference between seeing a digital representation of Sankirtan and actually seeing the live Sankirtan is worlds apart. You say, if you want to spread this movement, you do it as Lord Chaitanya did. There was no digital technology in the time of Lord Chaitanya. But he used massive Sankirtan and massive food distribution, prasadam distribution. These were the two main astras. So if you want this movement to be successful, then you have to adjust your mind to understand, I need to be hearing every day. We have classes morning and evening, and I need to be following strictly the rules and regulations, and I need to strictly follow my vows of initiation. Right? There are 8 vows. And therefore, when I go on Sankirtan and when I go and talk to people, Krishna and the disciplic succession and my guru empower me to be able to convince other people about the truth of who Lord Chaitanya is, who Krishna is. And the glorious nature of the Sankirtan movement. Glorious to Sri Krishna Sankirtan, right, which is the prime benediction for humanity at large. It spreads the rays of the benediction moon. It is the life of all transcendental knowledge and increases the ocean of transcendental bliss, and it enables us to taste the nectar for which we are always anxious. When you understand this first verse from the Shikshastakam, then you will understand how this movement is going to be spread, how it was spread previously, how it will be spread today, and how it will be spread in the future. Digital technology simply will disseminate the Sankirtan on a larger scale. Just like if you want to spread this movement to every town and village, you simply come with us to downtown Seattle. You'll meet people from every town and village of the world. You don't have to travel to every town and village. They're already there. They came to you. But you have to come to them. You see? So the prophecy of Lord Chaitanya will be fulfilled by doing massive Sankirtan and massive prasadam distribution. And we can have our photographers and our cameramen filming it and putting it on YouTube or whatever, so that other people can get a taste of it. But the real taste is when you actually come and meet devotees who are ecstatically chanting Hare Krishna. That is what puts a, let's say, indelible image in the mind of people. And then they vacillate toward devotees naturally because they're seeking transcendental bliss. If you stay at home, you will never get this taste.
Thank you very much. Hare Krishna. Thank you very much. There's one question here. And last question.
Thank you, Prabhu. So how do we strike a balance between accepting our inclinations and acting on our desires to change our inclinations? So if you accept your inclinations, then you're going to be complacent. At the same time, if you obsess over changing our inclinations, then you're getting more and more resentful. So how do we strike a balance between the two?
Yeah. So how do we balance between accepting our inclinations and simply acting on them, which would lead to this further conditioning? Yeah. As I give the example that if I have taken a wrong turn while I was going on a journey and I've gone somewhere where I didn't intend to go, I have to accept that I'm at the wrong place, then I steer around and go to the right place. So like that, if you understand that, okay, based on my conditionings, I tend to make some wrong choices. So then as soon as I recognize that I have made the wrong choice, at that time I veer across and come back to the right track. So to some extent, by our conditionings, the wrong choice may be like a default for us. And we may do it to some extent without thinking. But as soon as we realize, at that time we can correct. See, Bhaktivinoda Thakur, in a different context, gives the example that, if we have, while running a race, we have gone off course, it is not that we have to go back to the starting point and start the race again. So from wherever we are, we can come back on course. So like that, to some extent, our default conditionings will send us off course. And sometimes even before we realize it, we go off course. So what happens sometimes, we do something which we are resolved not to do, we fall down. And then after we have fallen down, the mind says, now we have fallen down, now fall down fully. just binge more and more. Well, no, we don't have to do that. I fell down, that's okay, that happened because of my conditioning. But now I can get up. Sometimes, quite often it is our reaction to a mistake that aggravates the mistake much more. I made a mistake, but then I just react to it in a negative way. And then I aggravate it, perpetuate it. So if a snake has bitten me, then I get angry. How dare this snake bite me? I am going to go and beat it to death now. And the snake is slithering away and I go and chase the snake. I pound on it. I may kill the snake. But in the process, what is happening? I am killing myself. Because as I am running after it, as I am pounding my leg, the poison is circulating in my bloodstream. It'll reach my heart, my brain faster, and I will die. So sometimes, by our conditioning, the poison snake may come and bite us. Some desires may just come up and we may do something. But as soon as we realize it, stop it. So accepting means just recognizing that there's a high probability of this happening. We don't live in a fantasy land where we think that, oh, I've decided now, and from tomorrow onwards this is never going to happen. It doesn't work like that. So quite often, we are not able to persevere in our resolutions, not because we don't have enough determination, rather it is because we have unrealistic expectation. Here is my resolution, here is the reality I want, and I think I just made the resolution, immediately the reality is going to happen. We have determination to persevere if we recognize that when I start walking, when I start moving forward, sometimes I'll slip, sometimes I'll fall, again I'll rise, again I may slip, again I'll rise. Just keep doing this, gradually I'll learn and I'll move on. But when we expect that just as soon as I've decided, from tomorrow onwards, I expect to be perfect. When our expectation is unrealistic, then when there is even a small reversal, small failure, we get so discouraged that we just give up after that. So accepting our default setting doesn't mean surrendering to it. It doesn't mean that not attempting to change ourselves. It just means acknowledging the reality that I may make wrong choices. But if we just rationalize the wrong choices and perpetuate them, aggravate them, then we'll never become free. But recognizing that the probability this will happen, and then as soon as it happens, I correct myself. So in a sense, in terms of inner improvement, the right and wrong choices are not so much like digital, they are analog. In specific incident, there may be a right choice and a wrong choice. But overall, in terms of our self-improvement, of our purification, of our overcoming our conditionings, our going towards Krishna, it's more of an analog progress. That yesterday, in the past, I was here, where I just succumbed to the conditionings. Now, if I expect the clock will just go from here to there immediately, and I've transited the conditioning next day, it's not going to happen. But every day we struggle. Every day we fall a little bit, rise again, we struggle, rise again. By that, the clock is moving toward like this, like this, like this. So, our capacity to resist the conditionings is increasing more and more. Every day that we are chanting, every day we are associating with devotees, every day we are hearing Shastra, every day we are doing Seva, actually, that conditioning is changing. Although that change may not reflect immediately in our having overcome a particular condition choice that we are making. But that change is happening. And as that change happens, gradually, we will find that the wiser choices will become easier, and the unwise choices will become more and more, will also become easier to resist. So it will happen gradually. So we don't accept the conditioning in the sense that we think this is the way I am and this is the way I am going to be. But we accept the condition in the sense that this is the way I am right now, and this is likely to happen. So when it happens, let me be alert so that I can course correct as quickly as possible. Does it answer your question? So thank you very much. Srila Prabhupada ki, Gaur Bhakta Vrinda ki, Thai Gaur Premanande.
Thank you, Chaitanya Charan Prabhu, for enlightening all of us on such a complex topic of mind with a very contemporary analogy on the mobile phone. So we will be continuing the second part. This is a 4-part